Babe, Chapter 11. Today is the day. The day, when it dawned, was just a little too bright. On the opposite side of the valley, the trees and houses and haystacks stood out clearly against the background in that three-dimensional way that means rain later. Farmer Hoggett came out and sniffed the air and looked around. Then he went inside to fetch waterproof clothing. Fly knew the moment she set eyes on the boss that this was the day. Dogs have lived so long with humans that they know what's going to happen. Sometimes even before their owners do. She woke up Babe. Today, she said. Today what, Mom? Said Babe sleepily. Today is the day of the Grand Challenge Sheepdog Trials, said Fly proudly, which you, dear, she added in a confident voice, are going to win. With a bit of luck, she thought, and tenderly she licked the end of his snout. She looked critically at the rest of him, anxious as any mother that her child should look right if he's to appear in public. Oh, Babe, she said, your coat's an awful mess. What have you been doing with yourself? You look as though you've been wallowing in the duck pond. Yes. You mean you have? Yes, Mom. Fly was on the point of saying puppies don't do such things when she remembered that he was, after all, a pig. Well, I don't know about large white, she said. You've certainly grown enormous, but it's anyone's guess what color you are under all that muck. Whatever's to be done? Immediately, her question was answered. Come, pig. Hoggett's voice came from the yard, and when they came out of the stables, there stood the farmer with a hosepipe and a scrubbing brush and pails of soapy water. Half an hour later, when a beautifully clean, shining Babe stood happily dripping while Hoggett brushed out the tassel of his tight, curled tail till it looked like candy floss, Mrs. Hoggett stuck her head out of the kitchen window. Breakfast ready, she called. But what in the world are you doing with that pig? Taking him to a pig show or something? I thought you was going to drive up and watch the trials today. Anybody'd think you was going to enter him in the way you've done him up. Only he wouldn't be a sheepdog. He'd be a sheep pig, wouldn't he? Tee-hee-hee. Whoever heard of such a thing? I must be daft, though it's you that's really daft, carrying him about in that poor old Land Rover the size he is now. That bottom will fall out. I shouldn't wonder you ain't surely going to drive all the way with him in the back just so he can watch. Nope, said Farmer Hoggett. Mrs. Hoggett considered this answer for a moment with her mouth open while raising and lowering her eyebrows, shaking her head, and drumming on the windowsill with her fingertips. Then she closed her mouth and the window. After breakfast, she came out to see them off. Fly was sitting in the passenger seat. Babe was comfortable on a thick bed of straw in the back, where he now took up the whole space. Mrs. Hoggett walked around the Land Rover, giving out farewell pats. Good boy, she said to Babe, and good girl, she said to Fly, and to Hoggett, goodbye, and have you got your sandwiches and your thermos of coffee and your raincoat? Looks as if it might rain, though I felt a spot just now, though I thought it might be different where you seem it's 100 miles away. That reminds me, have you got enough gas or not enough money to get some if you haven't? If you do see what I mean, drive carefully. See you later. 2:00, said Hoggett. And before his wife had time to say anything, he said, on the telly, live, and put the Land Rover into gear and drove away. When Mrs. Hoggett switched the television on at 2:00, the first thing in the picture that she noticed was that it was raining hard. She dashed outside to bring her wash in, saw that the sun was shining, remembered that it wasn't wash day anyway, and she came back to find the camera showing the layout of the course. First, there was a shot of a huge pillar of stone, the height of a man, standing upright on the ground. Let's see if I can keep this up here while I read this page. See the tall stone next to the man? Here, said the voice of commentator, is where each handler will stand, and from here each dog will start his outrun. He can go left or right to get into the position behind his sheep. Today each dog will have 10 sheep to work. They'll be grouped near that distant post called the holding post. See up here? So the dog has to run up here to the holding post. All the time the cameras followed his explanation. Then he must fetch his sheep through the fetch gates. That's these. All the way back to the handler's post. Down here. Then around it. Then the dog drives the sheep away. To the left as we look at it. Through the drive-away gates. which is way over here. Then turns them right and straight across the line of his fetch through the cross-drive gates over here. Then turns them right again and straight across the line of his fetch through the cross-drive, and right up again to the shedding ring. That's where he must shed his sheep and collect them again. And finally, he must pen them here. Shedding gate and then down to the pen. Mad the old thing, said Mrs. Hoggett, turning her sound off. Some folk never know how to hold their tongues. Keeping on and on about them silly gates. Why don't he show us pictures of the spectators? Might catch a glimpse of Hoggett and Fly, and you never knows, though not pig. I hope he's surely not daft enough to walk around with that pig. Can't see why he'd want to taken all that way just to lie in the back of the Land Rover. He'd have done better to leave on here and let us sit and watch it on the telly in comfort, which is more than some of us have got time for. I got work to do, and she stomped off to the kitchen, shaking her head madly. On the silent screen, the first handler walked out and took up his position behind the great sarsen stone, his dog standing by him, tense and eager in the pouring rain.